Is this thing on? I could never get enough volume. I left you hanging last time as we were discussing CHM, spiritual warfare, and things of the like. So we're going to pick right back up where we left off with part 2 with Joel Stewart without any further ado and any fooling around.
The Christian church in America is the biggest mission field out there. It went the more and more that I talk to Christian people, and I hear their stories and their struggles and people who stop going to church, and then their reasons. I listen to their reasons for not going to church. Man, they're valid reasons.
They sure are.
They were abused. They were hurt. It's not just the CHM. That's when I realized it was not just the CHM. That's when I was like, man, that's why our country is in the state it's in. That's why America is hurting. That's why we need real revival in America. And it comes from a forced view, not a forced view, but just a looking at truth. The truth of what's happening in our lives, the truth of the Bible, so that we can analyze our lives by looking at the Bible, but you have to come to that stark reality that, man, there's abuse happening, there is falsehood happening, there's something wrong with our Christian culture in America. It's not actually Christian on the most part, there's something seriously wrong. We're not actually finding Christ. We're not seeing Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. And I'm like, a pastor can get away with molesting people in his congregation. And the thing that shocked me, this Sunday school teacher that molested the individual in my platoon and the pastor that molested the individual in my platoon, they're still in the ministry.
That is so enraging, because unfortunately that's how most of these stories end.
They stay in the ministry outside of the Christian church, take them out of church, put them in a political spectrum, say they're in a political position, or say they're the head of a company or something. They'd be cast out.
Yes.
They'd be on the sex offenders list. They would not have a job. They'd be the scum of society. Put them in a pulpit and people will still protect them.
Ain't that
and
true?
Hold them high. That's sick.
It is. And I think
sickening.
I still struggle sometimes trying to figure all this out, because I so bought into the CHM when I was in it. And I thought, and I tried my best to be a sincere, serious CHM Christian. And I thought everybody else was too. It's almost like I still, in the back of my mind, that still astonishes me at times, because it's quite obvious that not everybody was sincere and serious about it. And not only that, they went to so many of these people, and not, like you said, not just the CHM, in a lot of the Christian church in America. Not only were they just not sincere, they were doing flat out vile, evil things and covering it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's still, at times, I still just have to sit and scratch my head.
Yeah, a lot. And you've covered this before. A lot of it is image. It's trying to save face. They've got, you got to keep in mind, and because my idea when I went to Bible college after my dad passed away in 2011 with pancreatic cancer. And, I thank God for the life that he gave me and the education that he gave me as far as the Bible goes, and how to look at the world that we grew up in from the right lens. Some people kind of criticize my My dad, they didn't really understand that he raised me as a Christian. Some people said that, oh, at the end of his life, when he was dying, he finally came to the Lord. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, what? Like, no, he raised me in the church. He raised me so I kind of want to straighten that out. If anybody's listening, my dad raised me to be a solid Christian. And I tell you what, I appreciate so much, because the struggle that he grew up with, despite the fact that, I went through it too, but he was guiding me the entire way. He was like, listen, short sleeves are not a sin. That's a crazy idea. But for some people, you know what? They're just babies. And it's going to make them upset. In some circumstances, put on the long sleeves. Don't get them upset,
Yeah.
Try your best not to offend people. But eventually things get too crazy and out of hand, It's like, you know what? It's a hot day. My wife, she grew up in Haiti, and missionaries would come to Haiti, and they'd be wearing long sleeves down there. And she worked for a mission down there, and a conservative holiness mission. And missionaries would come down there in their long sleeves and their full conservative holiness regalia, and they're passing out from heat exhaustion. And they're telling them, you can't dress like that down here. You gotta, it's hot.
Right.
So
I think there's a fine line, Joe, and I agree with everything you're saying here. But I also think that there is a fine line between that, trying to follow to the best of our ability that verse, where it talks about as it's possible to live at peace with all men, and to not to offend the metaphorical younger ones in the faith and stuff like that, weaker ones in the faith. I feel like that there's a line that at times with fundamentalism gets crossed to where I feel that I'm no longer just trying to keep peace. Now it's an issue of I want to stand up for what's right.
No, I totally get that, and I had some real battles with that, especially while I was at God's Bible School, because I'm paying for tuition going there because I asked questions my entire life. My dad tried to help out with answers as much as he could, but he asked the questions and didn't get any. So these were answers that he tried to develop himself and try to understand to try to guide me. But I had more, because I was inquisitive. Like I told you before, when we were talking off the air, I said, I didn't have many friends because I was the demon child. I was basically Harry Potter without the scar,
Right.
I was cursed. I was an outcast. And here I am trying to go to Hogwarts, and the conservative holiness Hogwarts here, and they don't even, my reputation preceded me just like Harry Potter. I sit there, I watch that movie, and I'm like, man, that was me going to God's Bible School, man. Everybody's talking about, everybody's talking about me, all this kind of stuff. It was kind of funny. I'll tell you this story. I get ready. My dorm is getting assigned to me, and my dorm mates and everything. And I get thrown with a guy from Haiti, which I thought was cool because my family did some mission work in Haiti, and I studied French in high school. I was so excited, so I was like, awesome, But come to find out, I wasn't actually supposed to be rooming with him. I was actually supposed to be rooming with this other group of guys, but they heard about who I was. My reputation preceded me. And I was like, what? So somebody from my church who was going to school there already told them about me, and I was the rebel,
Gee
I was like,
whiz.
what? I'm like, why would I be a rebel and want to go to God's Bible school? You know, my idea of going to God's Bible school right after my dad passed away was I wanted to be the best conservative holiness preacher out there. You know, I wanted to learn the ways. That was my mindset because I did not want to be a rebel anymore. I was done with it. I was done. I wanted to, you know, if the conservative holiness way was the truth, I wanted to learn the truth through and through, and that was the best place on earth you could go. That's why I was there. But these roommates, these future roommates, they're like, we don't want anything to do with him. Please switch him, put him in a different room.
So
we don't want
the stories about you having this spiritual whatever you want to call it, oppression.
That was part,
that had went before you to GBS is what you're saying.
From 5 years old all the way on. And of course I was considered a rebel because my mom was a hairdresser, you know. It was like, I can't control what my mom does for a profession, you know, but
right.
I had no problem with it, you know.
So was this looked at as it was somehow your fault that you were seeing all this stuff?
Yeah. Somehow my fault, somehow associated with me. A lot of times they put it on my mother too, because she was the hairdresser, you know, obviously the sinner, you know. And that to this day really affects my mother, you know, spiritually. I pray for her all the time because that breaks my heart how much that really hurt her spiritually.
Sure.
You know, just to have that constant ridicule just because she cut ladies' hair. I mean, most of the time it was old ladies and she dyed it blue. You know, these people were looking, you know, these old ladies are walking around looking like poodles. These cute old poodles, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you know, there's nothing sinful about that. They're just these cute old ladies.
So she has to watch her son going through this, and then the weight of that, the blame is then being put on her shoulders, is what you're saying.
Way too, from right after my dad passed away from pancreatic cancer too. All of this was happening. Yeah. So my dad passed away in May 6th of 2011, and I went to God's Bible school in August. So I'm going through all of that. And my dad knew before he passed away I was going to God's Bible school, and he, you know, he's proud of me. You know, he knew it was a good move. I still to this day think it was a good move.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it was a good move. I learned so much valuable things at God's Bible school. So I'm more conservative holiness movement than I ever thought that I was. I'm more CHM than I ever thought I really was. Just because of what I learned at God's Bible school and the scholarly outlook that a lot of the professors there hold. Now, the culture there is very different, I think, what you learn is very biblical. Professors are so serious about teaching you how to follow a biblical lifestyle and how that's what I got out of it. Some other people might have a different experience. What I got out of it, every single thing that I learned from those professors, I still use to this day. I go back to my notes. It helps me in my devotions. I mean, it really dug me out of a dark place. And I still have good connections and relationships with some of the professors there. And I love them to death because I see their desire for truth. You know, they're not attached to what the movement is doing. They're attached to what God is doing and what the Bible says. That's what they want. They want the absolute truth. And I really see that there. So I'm not, I'm not somebody who's like a lot of people try to say I was anti-GBS or anti-conservative holiness movement. It's like, no, I see the potential of a huge revival happening in the conservative holiness movement. I see so many people coming to a new realization. I really think that that's going to happen. And I think what you've done with this podcast is going to help because you need to have that realization, that recognition of the truth that's happening before you can really have true revival. People need to know what's actually going on. And then you also need to see what God can do through his word in those scenarios. So having that balance between what you're bringing to light and then the knowledge that we have with scripture and putting those together can really bring a revival, I think.
Joe, I like hearing what you're saying because I have a tendency to be pessimistic about these kind of things, and so it's
that's why I wanted to say that. That's what I've been thinking, and I've been listening to your podcast, and I've been thinking, and before I even listen to your podcast, I'm thinking, man, I need to write a sermon. Somehow I need to be able to get to this pulpit at my old home church. Get to the pulpit. They're never going to let me on that pulpit. I preached on the pulpit once. And the pastor at the time got in trouble for it, from what I heard. That's what he told me. Somebody got mad at him because they let me on the pulpit. I was the demon child, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Harry Potter. I had to, yeah.
Well, it's kind of refreshing to hear you say these things because God absolutely can. He could turn that thing around, Joe. I mean, and there are a lot of people in there that you'll hear about. Some of my friends might tell me, hey, I talked to this person. You'd be amazed what they actually think or some of the questions they ask. Just hear stuff like that.
And you know what? I still believe in holiness. I still do. And it's probably a simplified definition of what I grew up with because I didn't understand anything they were saying.
Yeah.
What was entire sanctification? I didn't know until I went to God's Bible school. And then when I go to God's Bible school and I learn about, I kind of disagree with the idea of the second work of grace concept, but I do believe that God works with you after getting saved to completely grow and mold you into being like Christ. Christ likeness is the goal.
Yes.
And you're striving towards that. But the goal that's not attainable in this life until you pass on, and then Jesus, you have that perfection in the end. But you're always striving towards the ideal, so that you are constantly growing, and it's never a goal that you reach, but it's something you're reaching towards. And you're
like
growing in that.
Yes.
And to me, that's beautiful because you're on a journey. You're already walking the stairway to heaven, and you don't even realize it. I think a lot of people don't think of it that way, and it's a glorious and it's a beautiful thing, Sometimes, you might, I stumbled on that stair. Jesus like, hey, grab my hand, man. Come on, like, hey, you're right here with me. And it's a beautiful concept of this path towards holiness and just growing in it. And you know what? We're all struggling on that path. But the more and more we stop cutting down each other and stop this bickering and fighting over sleeves and jewelry and all of this, the more and more we can help each other get to heaven. That's what I want. That's what I want. The older I get, and I'm only 35, but the older I get and the more I see the direction of the world right now, the more I just want to see so many people make it to the Lord, and especially people that I grew up with.
I know.
I saw so many people that I grew up with in the conservative holiness movement. They've completely walked away.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. That's what breaks my heart.
Yeah,
that breaks my heart.
I remember sitting down. A buddy of mine that I grew up with. We were best friends, and I was at God's Bible School. I was just thinking of him. It's like, man, I heard he was an atheist. Completely walked away from God. I called him up on the phone. And I'm pleading with him. What's going on? And he's like, man, the things that I went through, you just don't get it. It's like, yeah, I get it, man. I grew up in this too. Yeah, but you bought into it. And I'm sitting, because I'm right there at GBS, he thinks I bought into it. And it's like, I'm buying into Christ, man. I'm not buying into a movement or some man-made rule. Jesus. But he couldn't. You got to realize, a lot of people don't realize how much the actions that you portray, when you are saying you're a Christian, you are saying you are a representative of Christ. You're saying, just like when a politician stands up, calls themselves a Democrat or a Republican, whatever they're saying, they're representing their party. They do something crazy. Oh, the Republicans are nuts. They do something crazy. Oh, the Democrats are nuts.
Yep.
It's the same concept. When somebody says, "Oh, I'm a Christian," they do something stupid. Oh, Christians are nuts. And there's scripture to back this up. I read this the other day, and I had to save it, and I don't even know where I saved it. But anyway,
now you sound like
talks
me.
about yeah, man. I'm saving scripture all over the place, and I don't even know where I keep it. Right here, it's in Romans 2:24, and Apostle Paul is talking. Obviously to the Roman church, and he says, for as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you.
Oh, wow.
So it's talking about the actions that you do are making the Gentiles, the world, in your name, destroy your reputation because of your actions. And that's what we see with the Christian church in America right now. We see, because of our actions and the way we behave amongst each other, we're always, just think about it, we're always gossiping about each other, cutting each other down. The Bible says we're supposed to know, the world is going to know us for our love for each other. But man, do we really love each other?
Man.
Do we?
It don't appear like it sometimes, does it?
It doesn't. No, and this is where I started thinking about, and I really started thinking about this and really analyzing how that there is this strange culture of and concept. And this is not just CHM. I'm talking about the entire church in the United States of America. They have this culture that is permeated of hating the sinner or the ones who leave their particular movement or group.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen in Pentecostal groups. Somebody leaves their church because I've got some families that are Pentecostals, and I've been around all the different groups. I've seen it all, and you'll hear them talk. Somebody left the church. They hate the people who left and think that it's to the point to where, I tell you what, if they saw that person in heaven, they wouldn't talk to him.
I think you're onto something there. Yeah.
I've literally heard people talk. There was a split that happened in my church. The Bible Methodists came in and actually, I believe it was an asserted effort to split the church because my church would never submit to having another denomination coming in. They wanted to stay independent. I don't blame them for wanting to stay independent. I'm kind of rebellious in that way myself.
Yeah, I'm not a big denomination man. Yeah.
I'm not, but they wanted to stay independent, so a split ended up happening. And I think it was a targeted effort, to be honest. I think it was. I've heard some things saying it was. Whatever. If it is, that's that's just my opinion on that. But anyway, one of the individuals who was on the other side of it, they said, well, if I just hope that they have their own part of heaven.
Oh, boy.
After that split happened, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. That ain't how it works.
That is not
That's
how it
not
works.
how it works.
Oh, jeez.
We got to learn how to love each other now, because man, eternity's a long time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's a long time. There ain't no separate parts of heaven. That doesn't work that way, you know? So that's the kind of thinking that there's, you know, I've seen this happen. Somebody leaves the CHM, and for some of them, it's almost like they died and went to hell, you know? Like, it's like, poof, you know, that person's there's a demon now, you know? They're
not only that, Joel, I just heard, and I don't have the clip pulled up or I'd play it. Bree and Holiness, you know, they catch a lot of flack these days. There was a preacher that was teaching Sunday school or something and was talking about them, and he was talking about people that have left, and he was directly referencing like the Pentecostal holiness movement. He said something along the lines of, I would respect them more if they just admitted that I'm going to hell. It's like they don't want unity. They can't comprehend that we could change our mind on something, feel that, you know, read the scripture and come to a different conclusion. It's like he doesn't believe that's possible.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the attitude so bad, and at the point to where, you know, how Jesus gives the parable of Lazarus going to heaven and being able to peer down into hell. I've seen the attitude so bad that if these people were able to go and peer down into hell, and they see these people that left the movement, that they would be cheering to see them burn. That's how evil. I'm talking. You know, that's how evil their attitudes are towards these people. They're just, when these people leave their church, they say good riddance. You know, it's they don't care. And I tell you, if you're listening to the podcast and you have that attitude towards somebody, pray. That's a demon, man. That ain't Jesus at all.
Yeah.
The devil himself trying to put that idea and thoughts in your mind. If you got that kind of bitterness towards somebody, that's evil. That's pure evil.
It sure
so
is.
Like, you know, and like, I grew up seeing that kind of stuff, and it's like, man, oh man, you know, and you've probably seen it too, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not telling you, you know, but we got to break away from that. We got to really love people, you know, and that's been my struggle, because you know, like I said before and talked about, like I'm 5 years old and I start seeing the spiritual aspect of things. As I grow older, I start realizing this spiritual realm and these demonic entities, you know, essentially working for they're working for the devil himself. They are influencing people all the time, and they're behind these attitudes. They're behind these actions, and you're seeing a psychological world and a spiritual world, both in the same time. You know, I think a lot of psychologists don't realize that they're dealing with the demonic, and I think a lot of people who cast out demons or preachers or anything don't realize when they're looking at the demonic, they're dealing with something psychological.
Right.
You know, I think that there's a connection between the two that we can't quite comprehend. You know, that I obviously have some people have psychological problems or attitudes or something, but because of a choice they made, it always has to come from a choice, that there might be a demonic aspect attached to that. You know, we just don't know it. You know, we don't know. And it's all obviously on an individual basis, but I've talked to some people that are just pure evil, you know, and I did street ministry when I was in Cincinnati. It was the prayer station ministry when I was at God's Bible School. I tell you what, man, you run into some people that are just absolute pure evil.
Oh yeah.
If they had a weapon in their hand at the time, they'd kill you right on the spot. To be able to look at somebody in the eyes that does not care about your life one bit, like that's scary. And I think the biggest issue that we tend to have growing up conservative holiness is we are so sheltered of the reality of the evil that we are living in this world that when we come face to face with it, we just want to go back and hide within the walls of our churches. We don't, if we actually venture out and we get a little hint of that, man, it's so easy to hide. It's so easy to hide because there's some evil out there. There's some evil out there.
There sure is. I want you to give me your thoughts on this. We were talking about a lot of the things that we've seen or heard about within the CHM, and as we're talking here tonight about just the church in America in general. And I think a lot of people, their default reaction when they hear somebody like me or you calling out some of these things, they automatically jump to they're bitter or they're rebellious or they're just trying to tear down. But Joe, there's a verse, I don't remember the reference exactly where it's at right now, but it almost haunts me at times because it's and I hope in a way, I hope I'm taking it out of context. But it says to have nothing to do with the evil works of darkness, but instead expose them. And I think about that different times. It's like, guys, I feel that just sitting quiet on the sidelines when or at least when all these things are being reported to you, just sitting quiet on the sidelines, that does not seem like the right thing to do to me.
Let me give you two examples of that verse in action. And they're two stark contrasts. So there was a conservative holiness church that I know about where the pastor was apparently had an affair. Everything was hushed up. He left. He was kicked out. And the church numbers dwindled like crazy. There was no revival, nothing afterwards. It was devastating. Then when I was at God's Bible School, there was somebody associated with the college who sinned, but then followed the biblical example of confessing to those that it affected, which when you work at the college, that means everybody. He confessed to the entire college that he had sinned. This was a special service that we had. It's the first time I ever seen anything handled biblically in my life when it came to sin from somebody in leadership. He confessed to the entire college. We had a little revival because of it. Because it was handled biblically. And it was his choice. He said, no, I sinned. I need to handle this biblically. And people I'm still affected by that to this day. I think about that to this day all the time. I remember that. It was a stark moment in my life because something was handled biblically. And I see these two scenarios. You do it unbiblically, it was a sin, you cover it up, hide it. Nothing happens. Jesus is not glorified. Nothing is there's no recovery from it. Jesus is not able to do his work in people, not able to do his work in that person because you're not allowing it to happen, or you let Jesus do what he's done, and that's salvation and this resurrection from the death of sin and let him work in you and let him work in others. And then look at the beautiful, you can, to flip a sin around to something glorious is something only God can do.
Yes. Yes.
Something that could absolutely devastate and take down so many people along with him, covered it up. Because he didn't cover it up biblically, so many people were uplifted by the work of Christ in his life and the work of Christ in our lives. Anybody who is a witness to that, they can tell you exactly what happened that day. They'll never forget that for the rest of their lives, because God came that day.
It's so much easier for me to respect someone when they handle it that way. In fact, I can't help but have respect for them. And I think that that's the way that the general public, 90% of them, would also handle it. It looks...
they might not handle it that way. Look at the world we're living in. But if leaders in America right now, if they said, hey, I did wrong, I am sorry to the American people. If they said, listen, this is what I did wrong, and I apologize and I will do what's right. If you had the president of the United States say that right now, not going to happen. But, if Joe Biden came out and explained all of the adventures he had on Epstein Island or whatever, and he, would be a healing aspect in America, because so many people would be pulled out, and thrown into prison like they need to be. It's, the righteous thing would be done.
I think I didn't say that correctly. What I guess what I'm getting at is, if you look at these situations from a PR perspective, which I think is what many of these churches do, to me, it just looks so much better to say, hey, here's the issue, we're handling it. And I feel like that even the neighborhood around that church, it might get a little weird for a while, but I feel like in the long run, they're going to respect that organization more. They're going to respect that church more than it being covered up in some instances for years. And then, look at the Catholic Church has become the butt of so many jokes because of, that very reason of what happened there. And they are not alone.
The issue there, though, is they for years tried to cover it up instead of just being transparent from the beginning. It's like, hey, listen, we found these guys, they're child molesters. We are making sure they're getting out. Mm-hmm. We're taking care of this problem ourselves. This is wrong. This needs to stop. I'm PR chairman of my local Republican Party here in Michigan, and so that's one of my biggest things that I try to promote is like transparency. The people respect that.
Yes, they do.
They respect that transparency. You may do wrong may happen, but as long as they know exactly what's going on and the truth isn't being hidden from the people, they're going to respect that and understand, well, okay, all right, thank you for letting us know. We'll get this taken care of,
Yes.
We're right there with you as things getting taken care of when a mistake happens. Accountability, that was one of the biggest things that was kind of hard for me to adjust to when joining the Army. Accountability of every single action you take. It's a big deal. It's like, yes, I did this. Well, did you do it? Did you do it to the fullest? Is it to the T? Did you use procedure, use, and adherence? And I have to do the same thing when I'm working on a nuclear power reactor in the nuclear industry. I have procedure, use, and adherence. I have accountability at every single step of the way. And these are things that we, human society, brought this into industries and military from learning it from the Bible. You know, a lot of people don't realize the scientific method, all of this stuff came from Christian men studying the Bible, recognizing the truth, absolute truth exists, bringing it into the real world, and then they start discovering all of these new amazing things. You know, you need to go back to it's like, why don't we have these same kind of concepts in the church? Transparency, accountability,
right?
You know, this aspect of, hey, I did wrong, let's fix it. Come on, you know, I made a mistake. Let's fix it. Let's get this taken care of.
Absolutely. And what I don't understand too, Joe, is why? Because like I said, the Catholic Church is far from alone in this being an issue that they had. Why do these others? Because we recently heard, I think.
Oh, I know conservative holiness pedophiles. I know Pentecostal pedophiles. You know,
the Southern Baptist Church was recently in the
Southern
news.
Baptist, Jehovah's Witness. It's an American church problem.
Yes,
you know,
Amish Mennonites.
Amish, yeah. You know, I realize that, you know, it's like I seem, you know, because I grew up in the conservative holiness movement, I wanted to kind of just look at things in a little bubble. But then I started realizing the more I got into politics, the more I got in military and you know, nuclear power, I'm traveling all over the United States, and that the more I talk to people, I realize it's like this is just it's a issue in the American church. And that my wife is from Haiti. And I realized, well, man, all of the issues that we had here in the United States, we transported there. You know?
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, wonderful, yeah.
Yes, indeed.
You know, what a great mission work we did there. You know.
I guess one of the things that makes me scratch my head is seeing all these other church denominations that have hit the news since the Catholic problem. It's like, didn't you guys take notes? You couldn't have adjusted course. I mean, if you're doing this, if you're trying to win a PR battle, which I don't think that should be the focus, but let's be honest, for a lot of these outfits, it is. Maybe handled a different way. You know, learn from the mistakes of the past.
Here's where I think a concept that I've really about a lot lately is that in the American church behaves a lot like American left. And you might sit there and go, what? You know, like, what are you talking about? You know, and the fact is like you go, here's a great analogy or just a great thought experiment here. Go to IHC, set up a booth that says, Jesus turned water into alcoholic wine. Please change my mind. And then see what kind of reactions you're going to get.
You are correct.
It's going to be just like you go on to University of California, Berkeley campus and tell them, you know, men can't have periods. Please change my mind.
Right.
You know, it's going to be the same kind of visceral reactions.
Yes.
Kind of attitudes. Back to what I mentioned before, the same spirit. The same spirit.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's very good. You're on to something, Joe. I've thought that before myself. There's a cancel culture within fundamentalism. Even though these same people will tell you during election season how much they can't stand the American left, they're so alike.
Yeah, so alike. And I caught this in myself. Okay, so while I was going to God's Bible School, I realized I was buying into this type of semi-leftist, like a mix of woke holiness. I don't even know how it mixes, but it's like this weird culture that's kind of building up that I've seen in conservative Christian cultures to where you're dancing this fine line between leftism and wokist ideologies, and then also being a Christian, cool, and a conservative Christian, but you can somehow figure out how to dance this line. And I was doing it, but I was violating every single one of my principles, I'm like, but I'm just doing it to build this image so that I can be successful, in this movement, because this seems to be the cool thing, to be the almost woke conservative holiness, it's the thing that's growing in the young culture within the conservative holiness movement. I'm like, so I was dancing that fine line, and a good buddy of mine, he was there at the same time. He did not grow up in the conservative holiness. I have no clue how on earth he found out about God's Bible School, but he ended up going there and learned about the conservative holiness movement while he was there. And then he took off back to Idaho. He's like, I ain't sticking around. but I were kind of like in this, we were grasping onto this. This was during like 2016, Trump, I ain't voting for Trump, like he's got unbiblical attitudes, this idea is like, I'm either not going to vote or I'll vote third party, that's cool, because I'm not going to go all the way and vote Democrat.
Right.
I'll vote third party, because Trump's the bad guy. And then, I grew up in a very politically conservative town. I grew up in Hillsdale, Michigan, where the home of Hillsdale College, the leading conservative college in the nation. Yeah. I mean, you automatically recognize what I'm talking about because of their leadership in the movement. And so I grew up with that just by osmosis. I didn't go to the college, but like I grew up with that in the community and in that conservative environment. But then I go to God's Bible School and the culture that was there at the time. And it wasn't the professors. It was just something like a culture in the students. It was the young people thing, like it was in that generation to just be like this semi-woke conservative holiness, like being able to figure out how you can mix the two concept. And it's growing, actually, that ability to continue to mix this I'm offended by everything you say. There's certain political correctness words.
Yeah, well, you mentioned this woke thing, and one of the things I noticed too, and this ties right in with what you're saying. Some even openly brag about how intolerant they are of the opposing opinion.
Yeah,
and the way that they'll say it is, you'll hear a preacher say, I just don't have time for nitpicking, or people that just, they'll phrase it like, people that just constantly want to fuss and fight. And that's their way of saying there's no place with me for an opposing viewpoint. And it's the American left straight up and down.
My dad taught me, try your best to not get offended by anything people say. Words are words, and he always used the analogy, the sticks and stones don't break your bones, or sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. My dad taught me that it's a choice that you make on whether or not you allow the words to hurt you or not, and it takes time to develop. But this culture, this over easily offended culture, is not just the left, but it's in the church. And I almost think that it probably, like, I've had this theory that it originated in the church. Okay, so think about this with me. You go back in the 60s, and I blame the boomers for a lot because I'm a millennial. So this is what we do.
Yep, it's what we do.
But you go back in the 60s and you've got the super conservative parents and you've got the rebellious hippies And what are these parents doing? They're getting offended at everything the hippies are saying. So what are the parents doing? Well, I've learned, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, that every single action I do is being picked up by my children. Whether I think I'm teaching them or not, I don't actually put up a little sign and say, hey, this is a lesson, pay attention. I don't have to put up a sign like that for them to pay attention. Every single thing I do, they're watching and they're mimicking and they're following.
Yes, indeed.
So when I'm a parent back in the 1960s and my teenagers and 20-year-olds are going around being, hippies and all their crazy stuff, and I'm getting offended at the words they're using and every single action they're doing, I'm teaching them, and I don't even realize it. And what I've taught them is how to be overly sensitive, overreactive, and offended at every single thing.
Man,
and you know what they go on to teach? You know what they go on to teach their children? The very same thing. And then it just perpetuates for generations until we deal with what we're dealing with now. A generation of people that are overly sensitive, completely offended over every single thing because they were taught that. And it doesn't matter whether you're a leftist, whether you're conservative holiness, it's perpetuated throughout all the cultures. So throughout all of the culture right now, in society as it exists right now, that's what we're dealing with. We're just dealing with a bunch of people offended over every little thing. And this is where I really started diving into the idea of the masculinity of Christ. Like I grew up because I got to the point when I was at God's Bible School, I was getting so beat down because it was such a spiritual battle, man. I had people trying to take me down left and right just because I'm asking questions. I figured I'm paying for this. I'm literally at a theological seminary to be able to ask the deep questions and get some answers, man. I'm paying for this.
Yeah, if there's going to be a place to get the answers, it'd have to be there.
If it was exactly, if it was free, then I'd be like, okay, you can give me some slack.
Yeah.
Paying for. I literally went into debt for that stuff. So come on, give me some answers.
Yes.
Why are you giving me crap about asking questions? So anyway, I'm there and I'm getting, oh my word. And it wasn't from professors. I want to clarify that. It was not from professors, but it's from the greater conservative holiness movement,
Oh, yeah.
Because they're all attached to, it's like a large organism, they're attached to it. And it's like, I remember the time Pokemon Go came out. And people were showing, because churches were registered as a Pokemon Go spot or whatever, where people could go and, find Pokemon or whatever. It was just because it was tied to Google Maps or whatever, and so they were considered waypoints. And God's Bible School was one of them too. So there were people crawling all over God's Bible School campus looking at these historical markers on campus. They're not conservative holiness people, and they're going to conservative holiness churches because they're considered, historical markers because they're registered as that.
Sure.
And these pastors are freaking out. And I'm seeing this on Facebook. They're freaking out. We got all kinds of people showing up to our churches, and they're coming from all walks of life, and we don't know what to do. And I said, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. You guys should be sitting out there, start ministering to them. And we're talking, you've mentioned some of their names. I'm not going to, but you've mentioned them on your podcast. And they're telling me, you just don't understand. What don't I understand? We don't know what kind of people they are. Like, brilliant. Jesus. Jesus. You've never had many strangers and people from all walks of life showing up at a conservative holiness church just randomly at all the day, get out there with some lemonade and a Bible, start giving people Jesus. That's what you exist for as an entity. The church is there for that reason. Use it.
You literally have potential converts falling into your lap.
It's a dream. I was ostracized for saying that, for telling them, hey, no, flip this around. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as people coming here and you can lead them to Jesus. And they were like, no, you just don't understand. We don't know what kind of people they are. They could be a danger. You got to be kidding me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is, so that's the kind of mindset that just blew me away. But going back to what I was talking about, the masculinity of Christ, I really started thinking about this because I'm getting attacked over that. And that's a great commission.
Sure it is.
Yeah, it's literally at the top of the list. You get saved, you're on the sanctification journey as a Christian. The Great Commission should be starting on your mind. It's like, okay, this is a wonderful thing, walking with Jesus Christ. I want to bring more people into the flock. This is beautiful. We're on our way to heaven. We're going to bring more people to heaven with us. Jesus is great. That's literally that's like the Christian walk 101. People are fighting me over it.
Wow.
Like, I am in a spiritual battle, and I was getting so drugged down. I was getting physically ill. There was no actual underlying illness. And that's when somebody told me who had dealt with, he actually went to God's Bible School. He had dealt with a lot of, casting out demons and demonic activity and everything. And he said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but or who's doing it, or if it's just the devil himself, but you are being spiritually affected. This is demonic oppression right here, because there's no underlying medical illness. You were just absolutely, you've lost pretty much your will to live. I wasn't suicidal, but I just didn't want to exist. It was an existential crisis that I was in.
Sure.
And I was overweight. I was miserable while I was there. I signed up for classes one semester. I couldn't even walk to class. I physically couldn't do it. That's the state I was in.
It had you down that low.
Yeah. It was unreal. I had something had to change, and I eventually I had the opportunity to move back to Michigan, get out of there, and I still was in that state, and I'm back in Michigan. It's like, well, do I go to my home church or not? What do I do? Do I still stay in? And I was in that limbo period, still fighting that. I got this idea, I start, I'm reading my Bible, trying to pray through all this, trying to really just, I go to work, start working in the nuclear industry, and I'm trying to find my place in life. And I stumble on this concept. It's like, hey man, Jesus didn't come to earth as this transgender hippie figure that we always see, That's the image of Christ. You always, you see that.
It's always very feminine, isn't it? The image
very
that's portrayed.
Feminine. Yeah, very feminine. It looked, like it's not a carpenter. That guy does not look like a carpenter. I started working with carpenters. I started getting my strength built back up. I started seeing these carpenter dudes, and I'm like, that guy had to been jacked.
Oh, yeah. I've thought about that before. If Christ were here today, a construction worker is not, that's not the painting that we see in all of our churches.
No, not one bit. So I started thinking, it's like, man, so I started diving into the language that Jesus used too. The language they used with the Pharisees. I was like, man, that guy didn't mince words. You start looking at the cultural context behind the words that Jesus used. Man, talking about some offensive language.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Calling them snakes. Now to us, call somebody a snake. Woohoo. Man, a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
That was profanity level language, to put this in the context here. That was not, that was cussing them out, I think. That was not culturally appropriate language to use.
Just real quick, like the Apostle Paul, obviously a devout follower of Christ, he would go about things in a lot of the same way.
Oh, yeah. And they were harsh.
Yes.
Because they knew what they were dealing with. They were dealing with evil. When you actually believe that you're facing evil, you behave differently. I learned that. So you dealing with evil, you can't be weak.
Right. You're right.
And I for sure learned this in my military training. If I'm passive and weak and then I'm dead, then the other soldiers around me are dead. I can't behave that way. There's so no true. Way.
That is so true.
The army of Christ, Christian soldiers, we sang that growing up. You're actually a Christian soldier, start acting like it. So when that pastor starts molesting a child, you better start acting like a soldier. Stand up. Do something.
Yeah.
You better stop that and protect that child immediately. That's when I started thinking about the concept of the masculinity of Christ. We completely throw that away. We think that he's like some super soft transgender hippie Jesus or whatever, Right. I don't even know what they think he is. And that was the concept that I had in my mind of Jesus Christ my entire life. Then I started reading when he cleansed the temple and flipped tables and picked up cords. Like, wait a minute, that was reality. Literally flipped tables. Literally made a whip to try to beat the crap out of somebody. Because sin was happening temple and he was not going to put up with it. But there's so much sin happening. Churches in America right now. Horrific sins, and nobody is picking up cords and flipping tables.
It's like some people, it's almost like they can't be bothered or something. I do get that it is intimidating, especially if you're in the mindset of your hardcore fundamentalism. It's very intimidating. But man, at some point we got to stand up for what's right.
It's a necessity because your own survival depends on it. It's not just protecting other people. It's your own spiritual survival that depends on it. Because when you see evil happening and you don't do anything about it, that's on you. God's judging you for that as well. Not just the evildoer, but it's on you. You did not do anything to stop it. Not speak up and say something. That's on you. I'll tell you what, these people continue to go on allowing this evil to happen, allowing, we're talking sins from as much as telling somebody they're going to hell for wearing short sleeves, all the way to acting the most devastating sins you could think of towards people, and everything in between. One of those sins, it doesn't matter which one it is, it's affecting people spiritually, and it's abusing them and causing them to not even want to think about going to Christ, especially if they're coming from the outside and looking in and saying, oh, that's what church is? Man, I don't want nothing to do with it. Just think about the judgment that's going to be on the leaders, and then not just the leaders, but the congregation and the laymen, or the lay people that are watching and observing this and allowing it to continue to happen. Do anything about it. And
No.
God's saying, listen, you allowed this person to harm one of my children. You allowed this person to harm one of my children and push them away from me. Be terrified of me when I am begging them and I want them to come to my arms. I want to save their soul and protect them from evil. You allowed evil to completely destroy their lives, take them away from me. No, I don't even know who you are. Don't act like you know me. God's going to say to him, I know for a fact that that's going to be the message they're going to receive. And I mean, I'm just shocked that people can't think through this, like how much evil is being perpetuated because they're just allowing it to happen. We can't let this happen.
It's a shame, Joel. And as we're starting to wind down here, I wanted to read actually this passage out of Galatians where the Apostle Paul was dealing with some, really, I guess you could describe it as legalism, the type he was fighting in that day. And if you go to Galatians chapter 5, you start about verse 1. He says, and this is in the ESV, for freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Look, I, Paul, say to you that if you accept circumcision, Christ will be of no advantage to you. And he's addressing these people where the circumcision, of course, was being forced on some of the new Christians. I testify again to every man who accepts circumcision that he is obligated to keep the whole law. You are severed from Christ, you who would be justified by the law. You have fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit, by faith, we ourselves eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. So he's building up here, and you get to read about verse 7. You were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion is not from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in the Lord that you will take no other view, and the one who is troubling you will bear the penalty, whoever he is. But if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. And this here, verse 12, this is the one that always sticks out to me. I wish that those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves. And that always comes to my mind when I think about criticism that some of us receive, because you're being too harsh, you're speaking too harsh. Like, these guys took a strong stance whenever it was time to stand up for what was right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we could do just even part of that today, have part of that backbone, man, we'd be a whole lot further up the road.
Yeah. And it's a bold leap of faith when you do it. I think a lot of people are coming to the realization of it. I've talked to a lot of people in the movement that are realizing, hey, we can't just let things go on like it is. We have to speak up, but we can't just speak up. We have to have some actions associated with it. We have to take steps to, whether it's just the minuscule thing that's happening. Some churches don't have the major problems like what I've talked about, but they still have the little problems. Still work on those, because if that's keeping people away from Jesus, and it's not like, you can even, you can work through those things. It's like, okay, well, those are personal convictions that you might have, which are a real thing.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
And I've got my own, and I'm realizing the more I have children, I'm more conservative holiness than I thought I would. Like as my children are getting into they're understanding technology and getting into the world, it's like, well, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
Maybe TV isn't a good idea. Like it's like, you know what? It's like, especially in the world we're in, you got to have this. You got to have this ability to think rationally about things and pray prayerfully about things. Take everything to Christ. Look at Scripture. Stop being just this group of people that live in a man-made culture that they call it Christianity. Stop living in this, well, the preacher told me I could do this or should do this or can't do that world. And say, hey, well, what's the Bible say?
Mm-hmm.
Start looking at God's word. If your preacher is not acting like a road sign pointing you to the Bible, you got the wrong preacher.
Yes, very well said. Well, Joe, I've greatly enjoyed talking with you.
I have as well.
I think this is already, you're one of my favorite guests. You're you got away with words, man. You do a very fine job talking about this stuff. And at some point, if you're up for it, I'd love to have you back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm praying for everybody who listens to this. I really want you to grow in Christ. It's been a struggle for me, but I hope it doesn't have to be for any of you. I really want people to find Christ and comfort in Christ. Not that liberty, that freedom that you find in studying God's word and enjoying it. I really want them to find that. I pray for that.